The night Asher took a knife for me. He stubbornly refused to let me stay with him in the hospital. My friends all envied me, saying that he was deeply in love with me and considerate. But I knew he just didn't want me to be in the way. He wanted to spend a quiet dinner time with his assistant. His anonymous answer read like this: when you don't love someone anymore, you'll still take a bullet for her. But you don't want to have dinner with her anymore. After a muddled night, when I opened my eyes again, I was back in that summer 8 years ago. Young Asher rushed towards me through the crowd and said, "Scarlett. Long time no see. Did you miss me?" On the day the real estate project developed by Asher was completed, there was an accident at the site. A man who looked like a migrant worker held a knife and accused us of destroying his home. A knife stabbed straight towards me. Asher in the distance turned deathly pale with fright. He threw his phone at the criminal and rushed over to protect me in his arms the moment the criminal dodged. Everyone reacted quickly and soon subdued the criminal. But Asher's arm was still stabbed. Bright red blood dripped down his hand and landed on my clothes. He lowered his head to check. Only when he saw that it wasn't my blood did he let me go. He said, "As long as you're okay." His tone was flat, with a hint of relief barely detectable. The police car and ambulance arrived quickly, after the doctor stitched up Asher's wound, and when everyone saw that it was not serious, they finally had time to joke. "This really shows true love in times of trouble, President Asher. You didn't hesitate to protect her in your arms. If we had been a little slower, the knife might not have stabbed your arm." "Yeah, I was right. Your way of saving her was quite desperate. No wonder you two are childhood sweethearts. Your relationship is really different." In the ward, everyone was talking at once, their voices filled with the excitement of an idle drama, a plot coming to life. Even my best friend, whom had just finished stitching Asher up, couldn't help but tease me. "Look at you. With a gloomy face. Are you worried?" As she was putting away her tools, she said, "His wound isn't deep. He'll just suffer a bit of skin-deep pain. You two have really shown off your love. Who are you trying to envy?" I tugged at the corner of my mouth and followed her out of the ward. "I'm not showing off my love. I just feel uncomfortable." She looked at me suspiciously. Asher cheated. After taking this knife, he should have no more psychological burden. My best friend was so shocked that her mask almost couldn't hold her chin. It took her a long time to laugh and say, "You're being paranoid, aren't you? If Asher could cheat, then I'll never believe in love again." I motioned with my mouth towards the inside through the glass of the ward door. Among the lively crowd, there was a quiet girl. She silently adjusted the angle of Asher's bed and methodically arranged the ward to make it comfortable and suitable for work. During this time, she kept her eyes down, but the bitterness in her eyes couldn't be hidden. Asher would glance at her during the gaps in his conversations with others. After not getting a response several times, he became absent-minded. Everyone thought he was uncomfortable and left tactfully. After people left, my best friend paused before saying, "Is it possible that you're misunderstanding? Isn't that girl his assistant?" I didn't say anything more and silently followed her to get medicine for Asher. The girl named Iris was indeed his assistant. The assistant who was almost fired by him on her first day at work. That day, Asher took her to the construction site for inspection. The materials were placed non-compliant. When the workers were manually stacking them, Iris, wearing high heels, enthusiastically went over to help. The workers didn't notice her. With a tug, she stumbled. Her cheap high heels got stuck in the gap between the steel bars and the heel broke off. Her instep was swollen badly. But she stubbornly stood there and said that she came from a poor family and was used to helping when she saw workers working. Asher was very angry. When he came back, he hugged me and asked, "Is this kind of stupid behavior of hers being a green tea or a white lotus?" At that time, I often advised Asher not to look at her with prejudice. But in just 2 years, I turned out to be the fool. When I returned to the ward, Iris was standing with her back to me. Her hand hung down, and her fingers gently touched Asher's hand, as if silently asking if it hurt. I couldn't see Asher's expression, but I was afraid that the next sec and they would hug each other affectionately right in front of me. I was terrified of that feeling of having a hole dug in my heart. So I pushed the door open with a loud noise. Iris walked away calmly. wiping her face with the back of her hand. Asher frowned and asked me why I didn't go back with everyone. I raised the medicine in my hand, put it on the bedside, and then turned to look at Iris. Why are your eyes red? Have you been crying? Asher turned his eyes away uncomfortably. The incident was sudden. Everyone was scared. Scarlett, you go back and rest first. After we finish this little work, I'll send Iris back too. Are you sure it's because of being scared? I asked again. Asher pinched the bridge of his nose, using impatience to cover up his guilt. Go back first. Everyone is tired. I didn't move and stared straight at him. Just as Asher became more and more uneasy, Iris suddenly looked up at me with courage, her eyes full of resentment. I thought she was going to expose the truth, but then I saw her roll up her sleeves in a few quick movements, revealing a long scratch on her arm. Asher's uneasiness instantly turned into heartache and anger. Iris's eyes were red as she said, President Scarlett, when saving you just now, I also got injured. So, could you please let us finish our work quietly? I want to go back and rest earlier. As she spoke, big tears rolled down her face. Taking advantage of this scratch, she vented all the grievances of the afternoon. Asher was distracted by that long wound and said to me in a suppressed voice, Go back. Don't make trouble here. At that moment, I had nothing to say. They jointly saved me. And they both bravely got injured so that they could love each other without burden. Standing on the moral high ground. When they both looked at me, there was a sense of complacency in their eyes. The reserved dinner was delivered, and Iris started to set up a simple dining table. There were 2 sets of chopsticks. That night, I left like a homeless dog, feeling humiliated. The 2 of them, with the same wounds, finally had a rare moment of solitude in the hospital. Not long after, Iris's WeChat moments blatantly showed to injured arms. Only visible to me, forgave him. He said he was just repaying a debt. After the debt is paid off, he'll be mine. My heart ached. Even now, having fulfilled my obsession, I still couldn't believe that Asher would say such a thing. So I stubbornly went to check Asher's alternate account. That alternate account was registered when he was chasing me. He recorded the bets and pieces of our love there. At that time, he loved grandly and secretly. He tasted every bit of sweetness over and over again in that corner under a pseudonym. He said that this alternate account would never let me know, fearing that it would be embarrassing and that I would not cherish him if I knew and could control him. So I just quietly followed it without letting him know. I entered the account and scrolled through the posts one by one. 21:53. July 26. I've been having a stinky face for 26 minutes and 30 seconds. And Scarlett still hasn't come to comfort me on her own. What a shitty idea that single doglin came up with. What the hell am I jealous for? If I keep having a stinky face, I won't get the goodnight kiss today. Damn it. Lynn. After reading this that day, I took the initiative to kiss him, held his face, and asked him why he was unhappy. His eyes sparkled, and he said a greed lie that I wasn't allowed to smile too brightly at my partner. After I fell asleep that night, a new post appeared in his account, damn it. Long live Lynn. 23:30. August 2, I got the project. But I'm not happy at all. Scarlett was forced to drink when I went to the bathroom. I really wanted to flip that table and kill them all. I also remembered that day. I vomited and felt uncomfortable and couldn't sleep well. Asher stayed by my side all night. And his eyes were still red the next morning. Scrolling down one by one, countless beautiful moments came to my mind. I thought disjointed lie. How could such an Asher change? However, the next second, I scrolled to his latest post, which was at the same time as Iris's WeChat moments post. When you don't love someone anymore, it's not about dislike, boredom, hatred, or a breakup. When you don't love someone anymore, you'll still take a bullet for her. But you don't want to have dinner with her anymore. In the 29-story Riverside apartment, I curled up on the floor, my hand shaking as I dialed the doctor's number. I remembered what the doctor said. When negative emotions keep pulling you down, you have to find a life-saving straw for yourself. Now I couldn't find that straw. Looking at the open window, I shrank back in fear, afraid that I would lose my mind and jump out. Yes, had into self-obsession. I had been ill for a long time, suffering from severe anxiety and moderate depression. The genetic history, combined with Asher's erratic attitude, trapped me in this illness and made it impossible for me to extricate myself. I tried to save myself. After communicating with Asher, he said he understood, but as time went by, I could tell that there was impatience hidden beneath his gentle comfort. He fulfilled the responsibilities of a boyfriend, but he deliberately or inadvertently exposed his fatigue and forbearance. When I woke up in the middle of the night, he would pat my back to soothe me. But after I seemed to fall asleep, he would turn around and walk out of the room. He would go to the balcony to smoke or pour a glass of red wine. He wasn't careful when closing the door. I was woken up again and looked at him through the crack of the door. He, who was always perceptive, could sense it but didn't turn back. A strange tacit understanding spread between us. His actions told me that his tolerance had limits. He was reminding me to pay attention to the boundaries. I knew the problem was with me, so I sought medical help and tried not to show my vulnerable side in front of Asher. At this time, Asher started to feel sorry for me again. Occasionally, when I couldn't sleep and was afraid to wake him up, he would suddenly turn over and hug me, telling me sincerely that I shouldn't hold back when I felt bad. He said that if his attitude made me uncomfortable, I should say it directly. Only through effective communication could we get through the difficulties together. At that time, I believed that he really hoped to get through the difficulties with me. But it's easier said than done. Even the most unforgettable emotions lose their original appearance in the daily grind. I became more and more anxious because of his erratic attitude. I guessed that I recentered his world at that time. The phone was connected, and Felix's voice came from the other side. Felix was my psychologist, and his voice was very warm. "What's wrong? Not feeling well?" I was like a sponge soaked through with water, my whole soul sinking. I didn't speak for a long time. So Felix exaggerated his voice. "I'm saying, President Scarlett, you haven't settled my treatment fee yet. Even if you can't hold on, wait until tomorrow to come and settle the fee. The payment requires your signature." And, he paused. "Look at the message. I sent you a picture." So I opened the picture. It was a memo I left for myself during treatment. The memo reminded me like this. Asher said we shouldn't be like those couples who don't communicate. If there are any misunderstandings, we must ask each other face to face. He said he's so handsome that there must be people with ulterior motives. And he begged me to ask one more question instead of giving him a death sentence directly. Air rushed back into my chest. I struggled to stand up and closed the window tightly. Felix had pulled me back from the abyss once again. Self-rescue is difficult, but I still want to try again. I need to ask Asher for clarification. I've always believed that people who have deeply loved each other won't choose the most hurtful way to break up. Asher wouldn't do that to me. Felix sneered after hearing this. He asked, "What if he did?" I said I would take a risk and try his unreliable new therapy. He said that the cure rate of this therapy is quite high, but the side effects are unknown. While forgetting the pain, I might forget the person who caused the pain as well. Finally, having fulfilled the tough night passed. I peeled off my pride layer by layer, took my change of clothes, and went to see Asher. But when I got there, the ward was unusually lively. A group of medical staff surrounded Asher. The removed bandage was stained with fresh blood, and my heart jumped to my throat. Was there some other injury that hadn't been discovered? Did the people from the construction site come to the ward and stab him again? However, when I panicked and pushed through the crowd, I found there was no new injury. The wound that Asher had stitched up had somehow burst open. My best friend was rebandaging it with a serious face, asking him what was so urgent that he had to use this injured arm. Asher didn't say anything. He just coughed uncomfortably when he saw me. Perhaps my worried expression and the dark circles under my eyes touched him. He then softened his gaze and looked at me. "Didn't sleep well last night? There's nothing wrong with me here. You can go back and catch up on some sleep today." My best friend didn't turn around. She tied the gauze tightly with a hard knot. And Asher let out a muffled groan. Seeing this, the little nurses looked at me with envy. The man, who was sweating from the pain on his forehead, was still worried about whether his girlfriend had slept well. Such love seemed only to exist in fairy tales. A little nurse, with stars in her eyes, blurted out. No wonder his wound burst open. It turns out he wasn't in the hospital last night, but went home to accompany his girlfriend. The psychological preparation I had done all night collapsed at this moment. My best friend looked back at me in horror. After seeing that I didn't react, she glared at the talkative nurse. After everyone left, I looked at Asher almost desperately and said with difficulty, "I came here to ask if there's any misunderstanding between us. Should I give you a death sentence directly?" Asher was stunned for a moment, then deliberately put on a cold face. "Scarlett, I went back to the company last night. Wild speculation is of no benefit to your condition." He cleverly blamed my suspicion on my overly suspicious condition. He forgot that he used to hate those who said I was sick. He said that such remarks would give me bad suggestions. How could the once kind Asher have changed? I couldn't figure it out. So I asked Masochist Kali, "How did the wound burst open?" I accidentally hugged some documents. Before he could finish, Iris rushed into the door in a flurry. Sorry, Scarlett. I'm late. You can leave his care to me." As she spoke, she clumsily came to take the clothes in my hand. I didn't let go. She looked up at me in surprise. "Are you angry, Scarlett?" "I didn't mean to be late. It was my boyfriend. He came to my place last night." Her voice got smaller and smaller. Her face was crimson, and her collar was slightly open, just right to expose the hickey on her neck. Asher turned his eyes away. My hands trembled involuntarily. I thought I knew how Asher's wound had burst open. Seeing me lose my composure, Iris's mouth curled into a barely noticeable arc, and then she put on a pitiful expression. "Scarlett, don't be angry. It won't happen again. My boyfriend said he'll move in with me soon." As she spoke, she glanced at Asher out of the corner of her eye. Asher seemed to have never expected Iris to be so abnormal and direct. He finally became a bit uneasy and stopped Iris, saying it wouldn't be allowed to happen again. Then he walked towards me worriedly and tried to hold my hand. "Are you feeling unwell again? Do you want to go back and rest? I have no work tonight and can go back to accompany you." I didn't respond. I dodged his hand and reached out to grab the back of Iris's collar. Her collar opened, revealing the red marks. Iris turned around pretending to be innocent. I used all my strength and slapped her hard across the face. Asher was caught off guard. In a hurry, he grabbed me with his injured hand. And Iris, being slapped, staggered and fell to the ground. Her face was covered with a mixture of tears and nosebleed. "She's a crazy woman. Asher. She's a lunatic. A lunatic," she cried and hysterically cursed me. Asher looked at me angrily and shouted, "What are you crazy about?" My arm was pinched painfully. I held the screenshot of Iris's moments in front of him, and my voice was shaking badly. "Asher, there are many ways to break up. Why did you choose this way? That drives me to despair. I've never done anything to betray you. Why don't I deserve an honest breakup from you?" Asher looked at the screenshot in shock, then glared at Iris angrily. "Scarlett, it's not what you think. Listen to me and let me explain." "What to explain?" Iris wiped her face and interrupted him, looking at me sarcastically. "How does a breakup drive you to despair? How long do you want to tie Asher down in the name of that stupid illness? Do you know that Asher has long..." "Shut up." Asher saw that I was in a bad state and became completely flustered, staring closely at my expression. "Scarlett, take a deep breath. Scarlett, breathe. I'll explain it clearly." I struggled like a stranded fish and finally found my voice. "What to explain? Asher? Explain how you burst the wound while doing push-ups with her? Explain why, even though you don't love me anymore, you would still block a bullet for me but don't want to have dinner with me?" Asher looked at me in astonishment, and his hand holding me became even tighter. "You know about that account? Scarlett. It's not what you think. Scarlett. Let's go home. Okay? Let's go home first. And do listen to me explain slowly." Tears flowed down involuntarily. I shook my head. "No. Asher," I said. "That's no longer my home. I came here today to break up with you. I promised the Asher from 8 years ago, and even if we don't love each other anymore, We should still say goodbye formally. For the sake of our once deep love. We should give each other dignity. Looking at the wound on Asher's arm, I thought absurdly that if he had never blocked that knife for me, it would be better. I would rather be stabbed a few times myself so that I could slap him with a clear conscience. Asher panicked and tried to pull me back. I maliciously pinched his arm. And blood seeped out. He was sweating from the pain on his forehead and finally slowly let go. I ran out of the hospital and heard him and Iris arguing behind me. Iris shouted, "Didn't you say you'd find an opportunity to tell her? Now that she knows. Isn't it just right? What else do you need to explain?" The street was bustling with people and traffic. The suffocating despair came again, dragging me down. I just wanted to find Felix quickly. When I reached out to hail a car, an SUV came speeding towards me. The last moment of my memory was Felix's face in the driver's seat and Asher's terrified roar from behind. "Scarlett!" He shouted, heart-rending lie. I think I finally failed to save myself from the abyss. If I had a chance to do it all over again, I would never fall in love with Asher again. When I opened my eyes again, I was back 8 years ago. The day Asher confessed to me. Asher, who had just finished the summer vacation, ran towards me through the crowd. "Scarlett." He couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. "Long time no see. Scarlett, do you miss me?" On this day in my previous life, the feelings I had hidden throughout the summer vacation were pierced through by Asher. And my face became hot involuntarily. His gaze was intense and straightforward. Seeing me blushing and trying to hide, he turned my shoulders forcefully, making me look at him. He said, "Scarlett, I like you. I've liked you for a long time." The 46-day summer vacation felt like a year to me. I was almost driven crazy. I thought I would explode if I didn't see you again. I thought of countless ways to confess, calculating every day which way had a higher chance of success. But the moment I saw you, I forgot everything. Something like a mess was growing wildly in my heart. Itchy, having fulfilled why I'd say. Painful. Yet delightful. "Scarlett. If you don't hate me, please save me." He said he would count to 3. And if I didn't refuse, he would hug me. Then he directly counted to 3 and hugged me tightly. I heard the thump of love in his chest, which made me blush. At this moment, I looked at the young Asher in front of me. He had just run to my side. The sun at 8 or 9 o'clock shone on the sweat on his forehead, making it sparkle. Look, he once loved me so sincerely and passionately. When Asher hurt me 8 years later, I missed the young Asher from 8 years ago countless times. I missed him so much and wanted to go back and ask him why he had become such a stranger. But what's the use of seeing him? They were the same person after all. I didn't blush like I did in my previous life. The eagerness in Asher's eyes gradually turned into unease. And then panic. He asked me why I was crying. He fumbled around, trying to wipe my tears. But feeling it was too abrupt, he held the tissue, blushing anxiously. I belatedly realized that my face was covered with tears. And I got angry inexplicably. Asher, who loved so passionately but not lastingly, really deserved to be damned. I took the tissue from him and put on a cold face. "Next. Are you going to say you like me?" That the 46-day summer vacation felt like a year and her yearning grew wildly. "And you want me to save you?" Asher was embarrassed for a moment that I had guessed his thoughts. But he still bravely looked me in the eye. "Yes. Scarlett. I raised my hand to interrupt him. "Don't say it. I don't like you. There's no possibility between us. Please don't come to me again in the future." Asher was stunned by this time. We had known each other for 3 years. In these 3 years, from mutual appreciation to perfect tacit understanding, the quietly growing affection was hidden in every detail. Every look across the crowd, every accidental brush past made our hearts flutter. All we lacked was to break through this layer of paper. Asher couldn't figure out how the 46-day summer vacation could change so much. "It's not like this," he said. "Scarlett. What happened during this summer vacation? Did you encounter difficulties? If you have any hardships, tell me, and we can solve them together. I'm willing to share any difficulties with you." He was so anxious that he became a bit incoherent. And his voice stopped abruptly when he saw my indifferent face. There's no ulterior motive. I just don't like you anymore, I said, suppressing the bitterness. His eyes reddened. And he stood there, looking helpless and embarrassed. The tall man, over 1.8 meters tall, looked as wronged as a child. I turned around and left, resolutely leaving him there. That day, I heard that Asher was holding back his chairs while asking around about my family situation. Is she in any trouble? Has she had a physical examination recently? Does she have any plans to go abroad? As he inquired, he started raising money. After learning that I wasn't short of money, wasn't going abroad, and was until, he squatted at the entrance of the bank, holding the money bag he had just withdrawn, and cried. I also hid in my room and cried. It was hard for me to bear to repay the harm from 8 years later to the Asher 8 years ago. After that, I watched as the light in young Asher's eyes gradually dimmed, and the sunny and enthusiastic boy became listless and decadent. Finally, Heading fulfilled my obsession. One night when he was drunk, he blocked me downstairs of my rental house. Scarlett. Why? I can't figure it out. Scarlett. I've thought my head off and still can't figure it out. His eyes were bloodshot, and his sobbing voice was desolate in the quiet night. He said that love is like a cough and can't be hidden. He said, Scarlett, I know you loved me. He asked me what he did wrong and said that if he was to be sentenced to death, please give him a reason. But what was he wrong about 8 years ago? I came with resentment and couldn't help pushing him away. Stop pretending to be affectionate, I shouted at him, resentful and aggrieved. Don't come and disgust me anymore. So what if you left me? People still change. If we can't part amicably, then don't bother me from the beginning. Asher staggered a bit. And suddenly his eyes lit up. He looked at me cautiously as if he had found the answer. Scarlett. Are you worried that I'll change my heart? Is that it? It must be, right? He excitedly hit his head hard. Damn it. Why didn't I think of it earlier? Scarlett. You're actually worried that I'll change my heart? How could I change? I wish I could dig out my heart and show it to you. You have no idea how it feels like there's a hole in my heart these days. I laughed. How could I not know? That feeling had almost dragged me into the abyss countless times. I swear. Scarlett. I love you. I won't promise you what will happen in the future. But please believe me. I will never do anything to hurt you. Asher raised his finger. I'd rather hurt myself than hurt you. You will, I said cruelly, looking at him. Don't make such a poisonous vow. It will harm you. He was eager to talk to me. But I took a step back. Asher, on the 29th of this month, you'll receive an offer from a famous design company. And your father will stop you and ask you to go home to inherit the family business. After that, in the basketball game, your roommate Laolin will break his right leg, and you'll bring him food for a month. What? What do you mean? Asher looked at me blankly. I came from 8 years later. Believe it or not, Asher, you will hurt me. This is not my worry but a fact. So, I'll say it again. Please stay away from me. Are you dreaming? Scarlett. Laolin said his ex-girlfriend would throw a tantrum at him when she had a bad dream. I ignored him. Whether I was dreaming or not, he would know clearly as long as he waited until the 29th. On the 29th, Asher indeed received an internship invitation from the design company and at the same time, a call from his father to stop him. His phone dropped to the ground. And then he ran back to the dormitory like crazy. He grabbed Laolin's arm and begged him not to participate in the subsequent basketball game. Laolin called him crazy. And he handed over the figurines he had collected for years and let Laolin pick whatever he wanted. Laolin was finally moved and agreed to be only a substitute. However, on the day of the game, 2 players had something urgent to attend to, and the substitute still took the court at the last moment. Asher desperately held on to Laolin, and when a ball came over, Laolin fell to the ground while dodging, and his leg broke. Asher hysterically picked up the ball and smashed it at the person who threw the ball. They got into a fight, and Asher got injured. When he came to see me at night, there was still blood on the bruise at the corner of his mouth. He sat on the flower bed in silence, with his head down. When he looked up again, there were tears in his eyes. Even though he was reluctant to believe it, he had to accept this fact. It was undoubtedly cruel to make a vibrant young man believe that he would become unbearable in the future. But young Asher's focus was not on this. "How did I hurt you? Were you okay 8 years later?" he asked. I pursed my lips, reluctant to recall. There was a long silence. Asher said in a hoarse voice, "You came back to reject me because you had a bad life, right?" "Yes," I said. "I'd rather give up those beautiful memories than fall into the abyss of depression again." Asher dropped his shoulders. After a moment, he asked softly, "Did we see the aurora borealis as we said before?" I nodded. "In June of the next year. We went to the distant Mohi together." He kissed me under the dome, and there were many little stars reflected in his eyes. "After graduation, did I take you home to see the cherry tree? It should have borne fruit, right?" I nodded again. I had casually said that I really liked eating big cherries. And Asher planted a cherry tree in the yard. The cherry tree happened to bear fruit in the year we graduated. I stood under the cherry tree, and he looked at me, smiling like a fool. He stubbornly wiped his eyes. "Did we raise a cat together?" "On weekend nights. We nestled on the sofa. You held the cat. And I held you." My eyes began to moisten. This was Asher's favorite way to relax after graduation. He said it felt so happy that he would die content on the sofa. Asher continued, his voice trembling. "On July 21, 2021. I proposed to you, right? If there were no accidents. You should be wearing a white dress. With a wreath I made by myself on your head." Tears burst out at this moment. So he had planned everything long ago. He had thought about a lifetime with me since he confessed to me. He secretly looked forward to our future at moments I didn't know. But we ultimately lost to time. Asher buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "Then why? Everything was as I imagined. Why would I still hurt you?" I couldn't figure this out either. But after seeing such a young Asher again, I suddenly felt a bit relieved. Even he himself couldn't explain it clearly. Why should I keep torturing myself by getting stuck in this? In this world, the only constant is change itself. For example, 8 years ago, I was charming and bright. 8 years later, I became lifeless. I myself had changed. What right did I have to ask others to be loyal to me forever? All I was tangling about was not having an open and above-board breakup. Now that I had a chance to start over, it was time to let go. So I calmed down my emotions and told him about those unbearable moments like an old friend. My illness. His erratic behavior. The knife he took for me. The wound he reopened for Iris. And the window opened at night. And my self-rescue. Asher looked at me. His eyes red. The heartache in his eyes was real. Just as the indifference 8 years later was real. At this moment, he couldn't believe that those things were done by him. He painfully clenched his fists. And the veins on his forehead bulged. He told me to stop, saying that his heart hurt so much. It hurts so much that it's hard to breathe, right? The hands are also numb. Like getting an electric shock. Aching without a sense of stability. Asher looked up in surprise. The next second, tears welled up. He asked me how he could bear to do that. I didn't answer. I just stood up, ready to say goodbye to him. "So, don't look for me anymore, Asher. After this, you'll become a conscientious businessman as you expected. There will be people who love you and respect you. And your life will be smooth sailing. So, please let me go too." He finally burst into tears, saying it was unfair. He said it was unfair to him now. I ignored him and turned around. He grabbed the corner of my clothes in fear and despair. "Scarlett, I will never let you go," he said stubbornly, looking at me, and then softened his voice. "You won't leave until you give me a hug." He said compromising words in the toughest tone and then hugged me tightly. He buried his head deeply in my neck, and his whole body was trembling. Later, he asked in a muffled voice, "Did you become a designer?" "No, never." I shook my head. For Asher's career, I gave up my hobby and became a self-pitying housewife. But this time, I said firmly, I think I'll become an excellent designer. Asher finally let go of his hand. His gaze seemed to engrave me into his bones. Then I wish you success. Scarlet. Asher's figure disappeared into the night. From afar, that silhouette sobbed and said, "Goodbye, Scarlet." The following memories became chaotic. Anyway, Asher never appeared in my life again until I gradually forgot about him. When I remembered him as just a small episode during my college years, I opened my eyes in the ward. What came into view was Felix's puzzled face. Seeing that I opened my eyes, he relaxed his brows. "How many dreams did you have to sleep for so long? If you didn't wake up, no one would pay me the hypnotherapy fee." Then I remembered that I was undergoing treatment by a psychologist at the moment. A hypnosis should have started from the moment I met Felix's eyes at the hospital entrance. But I only remembered that I was treating depression. And I couldn't remember how I got it. Felix said this was a side effect of hypnosis, and would be fine in a few days. Then he showed me the authorization letter I signed. Before the hypnosis, I entrusted Felix with all my daily life affairs, including the agency during the recovery period after hypnosis. The handwriting was indeed mine. I had a vague impression of it. And I had special trust in Felix. Because after waking up, I felt an unprecedented ease, which made me feel physically and mentally happy, as if I had just unloaded a heavy burden. Felix told me to try to keep my emotions stable, not to force myself to think about things I had forgotten, and to wait until the condition entered a stable period. I followed the doctor's advice and left the consulting room with Felix's company. As soon as I went out, I saw a person standing next to me. Familiar eyes and eyebrows, but with a very different temperament. There was a bandage on his arm, and the high-spirited look from 8 years ago was gone from his face, replaced by vicissitudes and decadence. "Asher?" I asked hesitantly. The person in front of me stepped forward excitedly. "Scarlet. Are you willing to listen to my explanation?" He said he was wrong. He admitted that he almost couldn't hold on during a certain period before. Accompanying a patient with depression made him extremely exhausted. He wanted to escape, to relax, and to add some excitement to his dull life. But when he saw me falling in front of a car, he almost went crazy. The thought of losing me forever made him feel extremely heartbroken. At that moment, he was sure that he still loved me. He said that there was just a little problem between us, and as long as we tried to solve it, we could get back together. After hearing this, I frowned more and more tightly, and my head started to ache faintly. "Asher," I interrupted him. "But we haven't seen each other for 8 years. Right? Why are you saying these strange things?" Asher stared at me in disbelief, then looked at Felix. "What did you do to her?" he asked angrily. Felix weighed the authorization letter. "Just hypnotized her. I don't know what she did to herself in the dream. But please don't stimulate my patient." Listening to their conversation, I felt inexplicably panicked. I was afraid that the relaxed and happy mood would leave me soon. So I quickened my pace and left amidst Asher's calls. I returned to my single-person apartment. In my memory, I had always lived here. But there was a thin layer of dust on the furnishings. There were many things I didn't want to delve into. I was like a fish that had landed on the shore and fallen into a steaming pot. I knew danger was lurking, but I was indulging in the warm water and couldn't extricate myself. I hummed a song and opened the window. The breeze blew in, and I spread my arms to feel the long-lost comfort. I was no longer afraid of jumping off, and every muscle in my body was extremely relaxed. At this moment, I was so happy that I wanted to drown in this sunshine. Every day, I was full of energy. Shuttling between various design companies with my resume, and between various hospitals with my medical records. During this period, I ran into Asher countless times. He always seemed to want to say something but held back. When I asked if he also worked in this city, his eyes became moist. I looked at the injury on his arm and guessed that he might not be living a very good life. So, I earnestly recalled our college days with him. I said that he was so excellent back then, as if no difficulties could defeat him, and he should be the same now. I told him to cheer up. Then he started to cry. I thought I wasn't good at comforting people, so I'd better stay away from him next time we met. Finally, having fulfilled my obsession, I found a design company. It was a small one. But the treatment was decent. And it was enough for me to support myself. However, the bad news was that I was diagnosed with a problem in my breast. The doctor said that the probability of a depression patient getting this disease was very high. I said that I was no longer depressed. The doctor had a mysterious look and called Felix aside alone. I didn't really want to hear what they were saying. I was just immersed in my own happiness, with the attitude that it would be worth it even if I died after having a good time. But my best friend was very sad. I seemed to hear her say to Felix that my breast cancer had metastasized. Felix put away his usual cynical attitude and said there was still hope. Then Asher appeared in front of me again. By then, he had removed the bandage on his arm. But he still looked decadent. He asked me if I was deliberately punishing him like this. He had already fired Iris and arranged everything in the company. As long as I nodded, we could get married immediately. He took out 2 postcards, saying that I had left them in the drawer. Those were the places I had long been longing for. And I had planned to go there for our honeymoon. I looked at the familiar handwriting on the back of the postcards and fell into deep thought. Asher looked at me with pleading eyes. I water the sunflowers you planted every day. I finished the half-assembled princess castle you started. I can also make the cake you said you wanted to learn last year. I've added a lot of seasonal clothes to your wardrobe. So, Scarlett, when are you coming home with me? My head started to hurt again. And a familiar sense of depression suddenly hit me. I threw the postcards on the ground impatiently. Asher, what are you talking nonsense? I thought you were a nice person when we were in school. Why are you pestering me like a crazy person now? I need to rest. Can you leave me, a patient, alone for a while? Asher picked up the postcards painfully and stubbornly opened his phone. There were many photos in it, spanning 8 years. The aurora in Mohi, the cherry tree in the yard, the white wedding dress at the proposal scene, and the extremely beautiful flower wreath. The person in the photos showed 2 rows of white teeth and had a bright smile. Asher said, Look. Love can't be hidden. We've always loved each other. Scarlett. I suddenly went crazy, shouting that he was lying. My heart started to ache again, as if a 1,000-gin boulder was pressing on me. I shrank into the corner, looking at the open window. The door was kicked open, and Felix rushed in. I gasped for breath, obediently waiting for him to give me a sedative injection. In a daze, I heard the doctor's conversation. The condition is not good. The probability of a successful operation is not high. And the physical condition can't withstand subsequent treatment. After a long time, I also heard Asher's sobs. He begged me to remember him. Before the operation, he asked me to remember him no matter what, otherwise he would be in pain for the rest of his life. He seemed to be losing his temper at Felix, asking him what he had done to me. After a long time, a cynical voice sounded. Want to know what dream she had during hypnosis? I can sell the dream to you. My hand was held, and there seemed to be a few drops of moisture left on it. After that, my world fell into a long void. I seemed to have slept for a long time. When I woke up again, it was quiet around me. My mind went blank for a moment. But I quickly realized that I was in the hospital for breast cancer treatment. Seeing me wake up, the doctors surrounded me and asked me with great apology how I felt. I stretched my muscles and bones, feeling refreshed. Then the leading doctor spoke up, saying that they were really sorry. They seemed to have made a misdiagnosis. They had previously said it was breast cancer. But after further examination, they found it was just an ordinary nodule. They asked for my forgiveness. Such a piece of unexpected good news left me stunned for a long time. And then I cried with joy. After crying, I looked around and asked where the person who accompanied me was. My best friend rushed in from the outside in a timely manner and gave me a big hug. I asked if she was the only one accompanying me. And she pinched my face and asked who else I wanted to accompany me. The feeling of unreality made me think I was dreaming. But when I pinched my best friend's face, she shouted in pain. She excitedly announced this good news in the classmate group and said that we could attend the classmate reunion on the weekend on time. When I returned to the single-person apartment, that sense of unreality still accompanied me. I always felt that something had changed. but I couldn't tell exactly what had changed. It wasn't until the classmate reunion on the weekend, when everyone was talking about our college days, that I seemed to be pulled back into this world. Everyone talked about various events we had experienced together, and I remembered them all clearly. Which classmate was naughty? Which classmate was liked by the teacher? Who broke their leg while playing basketball? And who cried with money in front of the bank? When it came to this, everyone fell silent. Then someone broke the silence. He asked, "Lao Lin, you were the closest to Asher. Do you know why he committed suicide 8 years ago?" A string in my mind was plucked. I remembered that Asher had chased after me, but I forgot the reason why I refused him. However, I remembered what he seemed to say when we met for the last time. It was either "long time no see, Scarlett," or "goodbye, Scarlett." Anyway, hadn't fulfilled my session. I couldn't remember clearly. Lowland drained his glass of wine in one gulp and began to tell that old story with a somewhat heavy heart. He said that Asher seemed to have suddenly suffered from schizophrenia 8 years ago. It was as if there were 2 people living in his body. He would talk to himself as if having a conversation. He often asked himself why he did that 8 years later. Then he would switch to a mature voice to answer this question himself. They often quarreled or discussed whose illness it was. Then one day, they suddenly had a falling out. One said he wanted to leave, and the other didn't let him go. So Asher started fighting with himself. That incident was quite sensational. At that time, quite a few people gathered around and witnessed Asher slapping himself, with his left arm pulling his right arm. The whole person was in a split, entangled state. Finally, heading for phobia, he stumbled and fell off the rooftop. The rescue workers who witnessed the whole process said in horror that half of that person's face was smiling, and the other half was crying. After Lowland finished speaking, everyone at the table was in a low mood. I unconsciously wiped my face. It was wet. As if I had been crying. Lowland gave me a strange look, and I felt very uncomfortable being stared at. So I left the table early. Lowland chased after me from afar. When he looked at me, there was some resentment in his eyes. He approached me with a malicious sense of humor. "Do you know what Asher shouted when he fell off the rooftop 8 years ago?" He shouted, "Asher will never betray Scarlett." I fled in a hurry. I couldn't figure out why he was so obsessed with a relationship that had never even started. To feel at ease, when I got home, I ordered a bunch of flowers and asked Lowland to take them to Asher's grave the next day. This little episode soon passed, and my life gradually got back on track. On the day I won the designer competition, my best friend accompanied me to the award-giving ceremony. When passing by an office building, I pointed to it and asked my best friend, "I remember there used to be a psychological counseling room here. Why is it gone now?" My best friend leaned over to take a look and said, "You must be mistaken. There used to be a game house here. It seemed to be called something like Dream Making Space. Don't you know this? It was even on the news at that time. They said this dream-making space was a bit eerie. That it could really hypnotize people and create dreams." Later, someone sued, saying that people were trapped in the dreams and couldn't get out. They said it was very mysterious. I don't know if it's true or not, but the incident caused a big stir. Finally, heading to phobia, it was required to suspend business for rectification. That's why this place has become a script-killing place now. I rubbed my temples, suppressed my chaotic thoughts, and started to concentrate on memorizing my acceptance speech. End of the main text.